Well, let's get more on that story as there's funerals being held for the 60 Palestinians who were killed during those protests in Gaza yesterday. More than 2,700 also injured after those protests as Palestinians mark Nakba today, the day that they were displaced from their homes in what became Israel 70 years ago. James Sorene is in our central London studio. He's chief executive of BICOM, which is the British Israel Communications and Research Centre. When you see those images that came through yesterday, the juxtaposition of Ivanka Trump, all smiles, opening the new Israeli embassy in Jerusalem, and the pictures of people dying on the border with Gaza, what went through your mind?
Well, it was a tragic loss of life on the Gaza border yesterday. But, I mean, let's be clear, Hamas has basically been planning this for many, many, many weeks. And they've been very clear in all their interviews and all their statements that they were building up to a very big attempt to try and break through the border fence with Israel. They've tried that for many weeks. They've tried lots of different methods to do it. And Hamas leaders talked about wanting to break through to attack Israeli communities. I mean, I just saw some Facebook posts in Arabic earlier today where Hamas activists were instructed to take guns and knives, to conceal their weapons and only use them if they got through to an Israeli community or were able to try and kidnap an Israeli soldier. I mean, there was very real violent intent underneath this protest. It was by no means peaceful. I think the Israeli Defense Forces were put in an impossible situation of trying to keep that border secure because they knew that if very large numbers of protesters who were armed broke through, then they would face attacks on Israeli communities. And
it's a would have, isn't it, though? We've seen images, and there are images out there of people who were shot in the back, people who were shot while walking away from the fence. There's a baby that's been killed. How are those people a threat to Israel?
Well, I don't know the details of those, as I understand it.
Well, that's convenient, isn't it? But it is, you know, you're saying you're looking at stuff on the internet. Yes. That's the stuff that we're looking at as well.
No, I understand that. I mean, as I understand it, the baby was harmed by tear gas that was fired. There's a very real issue here about the fact that it was very clear there was violent intent behind the protests, and we do have to ask questions about why someone would take young children to a border fence in that situation. Hamas was very, very clear about what this was, and Israel was very, very clear, messages through all the media in Gaza, dropping leaflets imploring the people of Gaza not to try and break through the border fence and not to put themselves in a dangerous situation where they were close by armed Hamas fighters who were trying to break through the border fence. And let's be clear, Hamas is a banned terrorist organisation under UK law. If these guys were walking around London streets with weapons, they would be arrested, they would go to a prison for a very long time. This is not a peaceful protest but by a human rights organisation. This is an armed Islamic resistance movement that has been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Israelis over many, many years. And these protests, with the violence that was added to them, is just the latest phase in a long war against Israel. They tried to fire missiles. They've got tunnels that they use to try and get to Israeli communities. They've kidnapped Israeli soldiers. These protests were a very clever attempt to basically attack Israel, but in a different way. And I think a lot of military forces around the world will be looking at the situation that Israel was placed in. And I think a lot of people as well asking what else could they have done.
A lot of people, though, will point out that because of the 11-year blockade of the Gaza Strip from Israel, from when Israel pulled out, Hamas is the only structure inside the Gaza Strip that the people who live there, whether they support Gaza, whether they support Fatah, have. They are the people that provide food, that provide medical help. They are the government of Gaza, whatever you will say about them. And the people who live there don't have a choice, do they?
Well, Hamas is a very, very bad government, and it's basically causing the suffering of its own people. I mean, it spends something like...
But not everybody who lives in Gaza Strip is a supporter of Hamas.
No, but I mean, just to give some context, I mean, Hamas spends about 40% of its annual income on weapons trying to attack Israel. It doesn't invest in hospitals and schools. It doesn't invest in the infrastructure that's needed by the people of Gaza. The people of Gaza, they could have options in order to try and overthrow the rule of Hamas. And, you know, Hamas was actually in a lot of trouble before this unrest. It was getting more and more unpopular. It was very clear that Hamas was not delivering for the people of Gaza. Some analysts believe the reason why Hamas has tried to make these protests as violent as possible, to whip up as much violence against Israel as possible, is to actually divert attention away from the very real problems that Hamas has basically been completely incompetent at ruling Gaza. But there is a way out of this. It's very, very simple. Hamas commits to basically disband its military infrastructure, to give up its missiles, and it can basically enter a dialogue with the international community. You know, at the moment, the only people, you know, providing for the people of Gaza are Israel and Qatar, who are providing water and are providing other supplies.
That is another argument, isn't it? Because, of course, Israel does control what goes in and out, and great concerns about what it allows in. But we're going to have to leave it there. Ben Jamal, Chief Executive, sorry, not Ben Jamal at all. James, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.